Hey guys, welcome back to Gaming for Immersion. My name is Michael, and I've got another mod here. I would say it's another one in the series of mods where I'm trying to cover the mods that are a little bit less popular, a little bit less well known than the major ones. However, I have a feeling that this one looks like it actually is a little bit more popular than most of the others I've covered, and somehow or another it has completely flown under my radar until very recently. So, what I'm talking about here are actually it's a whole collection of mods by Dirty Dan. And all of these are unit upgrades, which is something very similar to the mechanic that the greenskins have with their scrap system to do upgrades for their units. So it's kind of based on that, but there's a slightly different flavor to each of these different factions. And as of the time that I am recording this, it looks like he's got these out here for the Empire, for Bretonia, for High Elves, for Dwarves, Wood Elves, Vampire Counts, Vampire Coast, Kislev, Lizardmen, Beastmen, Norska, Cathay, I get Warriors of Chaos. So, yeah. Obviously lots and lots of these. Not enough to cover every single faction in the game, every single race in the game, but you get the idea. Don't know if he's planning on adding the ones that aren't already covered, but yeah. Obviously, quite a few of your races are already covered by this. Now, I'm not going to go through every single one of those. I picked several of these that I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail, and I think that'll be enough to kind of give you an overall sense of what these are like. So let's go ahead and start talking about this. I think the very first thing, the disclaimer that I want to throw out here at the very beginning, very similar to what I talked about a couple of days ago with the Medallions of Chakwa mod. This one is, it's a boost to the power of whichever faction it applies to. So it's not a bunch of trade-offs. It's kind of straight up a boost to their overall power. So that's fine. It's done in a very thematic way. It certainly doesn't doesn't discourage me from using it. In any case, it is maybe a situation where you may want to play on a higher difficulty than you normally would in vanilla, for example, because these are, like I said, it's based on the scrap system for the greenskins. But yeah, the ones that I've gone through, they're even stronger than, actually quite a bit stronger than most of the scrap upgrades are for the greenskins. So yeah, you got the potential here to really add a lot of additional power to your units. Now, having said that, there's a currency that each one of them uses, and in some cases it's sharing a currency with the existing mechanics. So for example, when we talk about the Beastmen here, I'll show you that. It uses the same dread mechanic, the same dread currency that just about everything else that the Beastmen try to upgrade uses as well. So it's basically all a matter of opportunity cost. Yeah, you can add some additional power to your units using this, but you're doing that instead of spending your dread on other things that the Beastmen already had available to them. So there is absolutely a trade-off in that sense. Now, some of the others, like I'm going to talk about the unit upgrades for the Empire here. This is partially sharing a currency that is already being used in the Empire mechanics, but it also adds an additional one. And I'll go through all of that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, so this additional currency is obviously one that is going to be straight up nothing but a power boost for the Empire. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this in a little bit more detail. I'm going to show you some of these examples. I'm going to go ahead and read just the description of one of them, and then I will dive into the examples that show exactly how it plays out in the campaign. So, updated for 6.1, by the way, and I do want to go ahead and mention right off the bat that the mod author appears to be pretty active. He has already answered a question that I asked just earlier today as of the time of recording this. So yeah, it's always a good sign when a mod author is staying pretty active in the comments section, and certainly these mods have been updated fairly recently. Okay, so anyway, here we go. Updated for 6.1. This is the Empire version. Add several Purchasable unit upgrades to Empire units, similar to the Greenskin scrap system. The upgrades cost treasury or a dedicated new resource named Fine Steel and are not exclusive. This means one unit can receive all possible upgrades at once. Fine Steel can currently only be produced by the Foundry building chain. The Iron Resource building chain also provides some fine steel. The resource can also be used to construct buildings instantly. The upgrades are related to the equipment and special training of a unit. Training upgrades cost a lot of gold, but do not increase upkeep, and equipment upgrades cost fine steel and do increase the unit's upkeep. Okay, so short but sweet. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and jump into the example here and show exactly how that plays out in a campaign. First thing I want to show is that this is Balthazar Gelt. He actually has an additional faction effect here. Fine steel cost for instant building construction, -5 per turn. So already you can see immediately on the main menu here an impact for this particular mod. But of more importance is then when we jump into the campaign itself. Couple things I want to point out is the UI is a little bit janky, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail when I get into the Beastmen example. But you can see there is a button down here called Imperial Authority, and you can see that, for example, Mastercrafted Armor here costs 10 fine steel. You start out with 25, so that's your new resource that this particular mod uses. But then you've also got some of these other bonuses that you can add to your units that cost different other types of currency, like in this case arcane essays. And here's one that costs treasury, so it just costs gold. And then more fine steel. And what I like about this is they've got really thematic names. It kind of makes sense. The mod author has thought through exactly, it's not just a bunch of random bonuses, but it's actually, bonuses that are there for a particular reason. Now, going through some of these different units here, you can see it's basically the same choice of different upgrades that you can do for each unit. So obviously not every type of upgrade is really going to be particularly useful for every type of unit. And in some cases, the costs of those upgrades does go up based on the quality of the unit. Now, there are a couple cases where there's also some additional upgrades that are available for certain types of units that aren't there for other types of units. So there's a bit of variety, but overall you're going to see across the board, not just in this, but also in the Beastmen and in the Kislev ones that I'm going to show off here. You can see basically more or less the same upgrades available for each unit with minor changes. And sometimes significant changes when it comes to the cost. Also, some of them do require a technology to be researched before that particular upgrade becomes available. So again, just like the Greenskin scrap system in that respect. And again, I just want to emphasize, as you can probably already tell, yes, some of these upgrades are quite strong. Certainly, like I said, stronger than what you would get out of the scrap system. So, your mileage may vary in terms of just whether or not you feel like this is adding too much of a power creep to the factions. But since it is always based on an opportunity cost, where I shouldn't say always, most of the time it's based on an opportunity cost where you're spending a resource that you could also have used on other things. It's not quite maybe as bad as it might seem at first glance. And of course, after fighting a battle here, we get some additional arcane essays collected. So that's at least one of the resources that is used for this particular mechanic you can get just straight up from fighting battles. So that's kind of nice. Obviously, gold is another one that you get from all kinds of different things in this game. But the fine steel, just to reiterate what he said on the description page, that only comes from this building right here. This is your forges building. That is what allows you to build your artillery units. And so there's always going to be probably a constraint on just how much of this fine steel you're going to be able to get. So let's move on then and talk about the Beastmen. And it's more or less the same thing, but a little bit less variety that you can do with the Beastmen compared to the Empire. It doesn't give you the addition of being able to speed up your building construction. You can see here, Marks of the Wild is the upgrade button, and I mentioned that the UI is a little bit janky. So what you're going to see is that sometimes that button is there, and other times you're going to select the army and the button disappears. If that ever happens, just click off the army onto the map somewhere so your army's not selected anymore. Turn around and select the army a second time, and it should reappear at that point. I've found that to be fairly consistently the case with all of the different factions, so I'm not sure exactly what's causing that problem, but it's certainly a pretty minor issue that's pretty easy to work around. As you can see here, this is a good example of where the different quality of units within the Beastmen roster all require vastly different amounts of your currency here in order to do your upgrades. So it's obviously going to be much more difficult to spend your dread to upgrade your really good units compared to a relatively small amount of dread to be able to upgrade the lower tier units. And I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. It just seemed to me like it was a little bit more substantial of a variation between your different types of units when it came to the Beastmen compared to what I saw with the other factions I tried. So here, for example, after I fight a few battles and I'm getting close to completely wiping out Warhammer Spain here, I've built up enough dread that I feel like, okay, you know what, it'll be fun. Let me go ahead and try this out. So I go ahead and try this Mark of Finesse here on these Ungor Raider units. I started out putting it on one, then I decided, you know what the heck, it wasn't really all that expensive. Let's go ahead and apply it to all of them. And they do get a little bit of a little icon down here on their unit card to show what particular buff they have. Now, one difference between the Beastmen and some of the others, like the Empire that we just talked about, is these guys, I'm pretty sure, can only have one upgrade per unit, whereas the others can actually have all of the different upgrades if you have enough currency to spend on it. And then finally, one more example here. This is Kislev. Now, Kislev has a little bit of variation depending on which faction leader you're playing here. So this is a Mother Ostankia campaign, and this is using the Spirit Essence as the particular currency. When you're talking about the other Kislev leaders, your Kastaltans and Tsarina Katarine and Boris, they all use Defiance, which is a new currency. But like I said here with Mother Ostankia, since she's got a little bit of a different system, this one is using the Spirit Essence. And you get a sense here of what the different upgrades are. They're basically prayers to your different gods and goddesses here, and again with some appropriate buffs, but those buffs do tend to be quite strong indeed. The other thing that you can do is you can use your Spirit Essence with this mod to rush the building inside your settlements. So go ahead and show a quick example of that right here. And then finally, I wanted to go ahead and show an example of actually using it. So I go ahead and give this Incarnate Elemental of Beasts the Prayer to Salyak, which is going to give it a little bit of a barrier, and also the passive ability of regeneration, which I find to be quite useful for single entity units like this. So reasonably expensive to buy it, but you know, that's the name of the game. That adds a lot of additional power to this. You would expect it to cost something. And so there you have it. I mean, that is basically in a nutshell what this mod does. A little bit of variation as you go from one faction to the other. Some of them allow you to use a currency to speed up, to rush build your buildings and your settlements. Others, like the Beastmen, are simply providing these unit upgrades. I feel like they add a nice little thematic element to your to your units, and I like it because it can really make you get seriously attached to some of your units. I like to quite often name the units, so I like getting attached to them. Again, adds a little bit of extra thematic flavor to a particular campaign. At the same time, you do want to be aware that it is going to basically make your faction and your race, actually, more powerful. I did ask whether or not the AI uses this, and indeed they do. He said that starting around turn 25, they will start applying upgrades to their own units. So it's not just a boost to the player, but obviously it is certainly more of a boost to the player than it would be to the AI. So just something to take into consideration there. So anyway, kind of a short and sweet one, but I thought it adds a lot of additional flavor to a campaign, nice and thematic. Again, let me know if any of you have any experience with this particular mod. Like I said, somehow it flew under the radar for me. But I'm glad I found it now. I'm actually going through and trying to do like build guides for what mods work best with different legendary lords, and I stumbled across the Beastmen version of this mod as I was working on what would be a good collection of mods to use for a Beastmen campaign. So that's how I stumbled on this, and lo and behold, I find that it's available for all kinds of factions. So anyway, I'm sure that plenty of you already have some experience with this. Please do share your own thoughts and ideas and questions or anything like that in the comment section below. If you have any other particular mods that you would like me to cover, please always feel free to recommend those to me. And I think with that, I'll go ahead and leave it there. So thanks everybody so much for watching and listening. I will see you all in the next video.